some time, I want us to pay attention to language and word choice. I think it's really important because you're partly right. But when we use words, it's called universal affirmatives, right? Sorry to go back to Logic 101 or Intro to Philosophy classes. What the person hears is that nobody wants to stay in shelter, that everybody wants to stay somewhere else. And the reason that that is supported is that we can show people who think that. So we get a half a dozen people, 50, whatever, 100 people. And so we assume that everybody thinks like that. And that's just faulty reasoning. What is absolutely true, where you are absolutely right now, is that shelter is not for everyone. And it is not optimal. And I'm going to agree with you, even as the guy who has been doing this for almost 30 years, including housing, that shelter is not the answer. Down with you on that. That's why Mercy House houses will house 1,300 people this year in permanent housing. Most of it permanent supportive housing. So we're in agreement. And there are negative experiences in shelters. Absolutely. Absolutely. But there are a lot of people who are appreciative of the shelter. There are a lot of people who find a lot of good in shelter. And the reason I know is that I house about 1,300 of them into permanent housing as a consequence. It is not for everyone, and there are bad experiences. But it is not Lord of the Flies, as was suggested earlier. It is different than an open area, because I've worked in those places as well, and the comments that were made earlier are absolutely right. I get that. But let's just be clear. We don't have to overstate our position and shoot our allies. Shelters work really, really well for some people, and they are wholly inadequate. No question. No question. We have got to do better. But the key to this, and the reason why there's an issue with the bed for every head, isn't in the shelter operations, guys. It's in housing placements. And the housing placements is a three-part system. As the guy who operates bridges in the Armory and others, our job is not housing placements, contrary to what you might read or what might be said. Our job is to get them ready for housing. Our job is to get them in, to do the assessments, to determine the type of housing that's needed, to have a housing plan for everyone, and to have them ready for the next step, which is then to coordinated entry, which is to match them to housing, which is not a Mercy House thing. It's a 211 OC thing. It's a county thing. It ain't me. We get them ready, they get matched. That's part 2. And there's part 3. They get matched to a housing provider. And there's a bunch of us that do it. That's where the jam up is that they're not getting into that housing. We wouldn't need 1,000 shelter beds if our housing worked better, if the matches were quicker, if the housing providers worked harder to get them placed more quickly, and if cities allowed for more development. If we don't do those things, we are exactly where we are. Let me say one other thing, since I've got the soapbox here and I may not speak again. This is not good versus evil. These are competing virtues. I am an advocate. I am an activist. My whole life study, I was a theology major, was in the pursuit of social justice. My entire life's work has been to end poverty and to end homelessness. While I run these shelters, there has been no one more passionate about the Housing First movement in Orange County. Hell, I brought it here. Been doing it longer and harder and more embarrassingly than anybody in the county. I'm in. I'm all in. My God, I'm all in. But guys, here's the thing. There's a bunch of people out here that worked so hard for their homes, who have kids who just want a safe place to play, who want who want investments that can appreciate at a modest rate. That's virtuous. People with businesses that surround it want to turn a profit. And before we despise profit, and yeah, I'm a bit of a socialist, I get it. But you know what? If we don't generate profit, the whole thing falls apart. These are not the enemies of activists. These aren't people who want to see people poor and suffering, but we've got to figure out the answer. An answer that works for the people who simply want safe and sane neighborhoods, who want a reasonable return on their property investment? And you know what that answer is? Housing. The beautiful thing about the conflict here between the advocates and the homeowners and the businesses is we all have the same answer, we just don't realize it. It's in the creation of housing. Thank you.
I have several questions. One of them is in regards to the contact at the riverbed. And according to the paper, at least the way I understand it, was there was like 1,200 contacts made, 900 and some, almost 1,000 were negative. No, we don't want any help at all. Okay.
Did everybody hear Clint?
Yes. Okay, so according to the register, unless I'm totally wrong on this, there was about 1,100 contacts, I'm assuming city, made with the homeless people in the riverbed. 900 of them turned down any help. My question is, and I have several of them, it's a multi-point thing here. The people that turned down help, the lady over here brought it up earlier. Why put up with it? I don't know what, I'm going to get to my answer here in a minute. The 180 people that you have helped find housing, I'm just wondering what the recidivism rate is on that. How many people are still in housing? How many people have gone back? That's just a question that I have. The other question that I have, and this is going to, pardon the vernacular, it's going to piss off some people in this room, but in reference to my neighbor over here, my dad used to say, government isn't everything for everybody. All right? My answer to this lady right here is, and everybody else in this room that's concerned about this problem, if you're that concerned about helping the people out of the riverbed, step right up here to the front of this room, give the people up here your name, your number, and your address, and tell them that you are willing and able to take somebody off of there and put them up in your house. All right? Are you willing to do that? Taking anybody off the riverbed and putting them in your house. Congratulations. Okay? The other thing my dad used to say was, put up or shut up, boy. So that's my answer to all these people here. If you want to help them, put up and shut up.
Clint, one of your questions was what the recidivism rate is, and I think we could probably answer. We probably have an answer for that.
Yeah, so a couple, just specifically answering your question. So of the 400, out of the 125, so we don't just take them somewhere and say good luck, see you later. We actually follow them depending on whatever those circumstances are. Of the 125 that we have seen street exit, meaning that's an official term, they sort of have moved on to something towards permanent housing. Of that, 16 of those have been under recidivism. I didn't quick enough.
10%.
Probably about right. I think that's fair.
Okay, so now let me just ask you a question, because it was pointed out to me that my numbers are wrong.
This will be your last question.
Okay. The numbers that I quoted, the 1,100 contacts and 900 rejections, are those accurate? I was told by this man over here that they're not accurate.
Yeah, those are not our numbers. That's reported by the Sheriff's Department. So 2 thoughts on that. That's individual contacts. So when they're counting as contacts, interactions with an individual, whether those are duplicate or not, I don't know. Our number was, do you know the answer to that?
I'm about to call Mike Lozelle up here to give you his take on, he's on the front line. He's down there asking these questions.
Let me give you the answer to our, so we did a census. We identified 422 individuals. We did do a census in July.
Yeah, and the register says there's roughly 400 to 500 people living in.
We identified 422 between Ball and Chapman. So in that sort of stretch, we identified, we interviewed most of them. Our answer was, according to our survey and our conversations with them, which was sometimes with law enforcement, sometimes not, we had over an 81%, higher than 81% interest in case management. So that may be in contrast with the other numbers, but from our experience, the majority of those people were interested in actually getting onto some sort of housing plan if they could get out of there. They were interested.
So according to the Orange County Sheriff's Department statistics that they provided us from the riverbed, from September through November, they had, excuse me, I gotta take my glasses off for this. 1,745 contacts were made, and refusal of immediate services, 1,412.
Let me take some of the other questions here. Right up close, right up close, right up close.
I do. And 198 misdemeanor arrests have been effected and 28 felonies during that same time period.
The question from here was about, in the newspaper recently, there's talk about closing a storage facility. I think that's the La Palma storage facility.
Yeah, I can answer that. So, Community Services, we oversee the contract for both CityNet and Mercy House. And Mercy House facilitates the La Palma Check-in Center. 2 council meetings ago, there was a proposal to transform that to an appointment-only storage facility, transitional storage. And with a lot of council input, that's been reevaluated. So they're just going to slowly, they'll still be offering all the same services that are currently provided, but they're just going to slowly transition that downward depending on the usage. And then any savings are going to be redirecting those resources to case management to help the people that, again, are looking for direction towards housing.
One of the things I see is the elephant in the room here that has been touched on. We're using phrases that housing is not for everybody and different phrases like that. One of the things that's a mindset that's been in place for over 35 years that I'm aware of, still in place. The reason it's not for everybody is many of these people, when they're honest with you, they'll say, we can't do drugs, we can't get drunk, we can't fight, and we can't cuss. Now, if anybody tries to deny that, then they're foolish in their own thoughts, because that's a requirement when you go into one of these controlled environments, which I totally agree with. You shouldn't be able to have people doing drugs and getting drunk and fighting with each other.
So, let me piss off the other side of the room now. No one has said here that I'm aware of that housing is not for anyone. In fact, I'm going to strongly say the opposite. Housing is for everyone, and housing works for everyone. What I did say, and what was said, is that shelter is not for everyone. And let me be perfectly clear, shelter and housing are 2 entirely different things. So again, I'll speak to my agency's example. I think we operate as much permanent supportive housing as almost anyone in Orange County, if not more. I've lost track of the statistics. And we take people who are drug addicts, who have serious mental illnesses, physically disabled, medically fragile, whatever the new shiny term is that we all like to use. People who've been out of the streets for 20 some odd years. People that you would think would never, ever function in housing, would never make it. And we've led a coalition of ourselves and several other nonprofit organizations. As I said before, we house hundreds of people every year. And our recidivism rate from this very needy population, our retention rate, is about 95%. So let's be very, very clear. Just as we say, when a few people say, I don't like shelter, that doesn't mean everybody, right? Lesson number 1. Number 2, let's not confuse shelter and housing. They're entirely different animals. And while I do agree that shelter is not for everyone, housing absolutely is for everyone, and housing works for everyone.
You got your mic.
Okay, I have one quick comment and then one quick question. The first comment is one of the things that I'm concerned about is people in District 5 have referred to as NIMBY people, when the problem is that what I suspect has happened is that the county has chosen not to enforce anti-camping ordinance on the riverbed, whereas they enforced it out at other camps or other parks, thereby creating a de facto shelter on the riverbed, a shelter that did not go through any sort of planning commission, did not go through any sort of environmental studies or anything else. It was just thrust upon the residents of District 5. That's not NIMBYism, okay? So I've heard people accuse that of us. We're not, it's a situation that was thrust upon us, okay? But I do have a question. My next question is this. What recent legislation has happened on the state level? What is out there that is going to help resolve these issues? Because we've always heard that this is a state issue. That this is a state issue, not necessarily a city issue or a county issue. What legislation is out there, and how is it that Anaheim is going to be able to work with the county and to be able to get in there and get the resources that maybe that legislation has made available for us? Thank you.
So, forthcoming legislation, I think, is the question.
When you walked in, there were handouts, and one of those handouts was the Office of Care Coordination newsletter, and there's a whole page that's dedicated to the recent state legislation that deals with affordable housing. So that certainly will help Anaheim, and we're one of 4 housing authorities in the entire county, and we have done a number of affordable housing projects, and we continue to do more. We have a veterans project coming online, we have an affordable senior project coming online, but if you look at page, it doesn't have page numbers on it. In the newsletter, on one of the pages, it will walk you through all of the state legislation that is for affordable housing, which will definitely help us. Did I answer your question, David?
I'll just echo that there is some state legislation, some that was attempted by Assemblywoman Sharon Quirk-Silva that didn't get approved, but we also have SB2 zones, which are basically all cities statewide, as a result of the state legislation, have to identify parcels that can be used for permanent supportive housing. So we have worked with providers like Jamboree Housing and other nonprofits that build permanent supportive housing. And so we are looking as part of Operation Home Safe and longer term planning for the city's homeless programs to identify those SB2 zones that can be used to create the additional housing that truly provides a more permanent structure for individuals who are either in transitional housing now or homeless and not housed at this time. So working broadly across the board. And I just want to share, I did meet with very recently, in the last week, with Assemblywoman Sharon Quirk-Silva and Senator Josh Newman, and both are engaged in Operation Home Safe and want to help. And particularly, we do have a real emphasis in supporting veterans in this program as well. Senator Newman is a veteran himself, and so they're both working to identify additional funding and any regulatory relief that can be helpful in this issue as well.
Actually, David, can I add one thing to your question too on the county jurisdictional issue? It should be good news to everyone here that rather than point fingers and say, oh, it's not our jurisdiction, it's theirs. Under Sheriff Don Barnes and I talk regularly about the issues in there, and the good news is that the City of Orange, Anaheim, the county, Fountain Valley, Santa Ana are all actually at the table, bringing resources to bear to leverage what's going on in there. So it's not the finger pointing thing is not happening. It's collectively, this is impacting you. You don't care about jurisdictional boundaries or issues, and so nor should we. So we're working at it collectively.
Another question?
Good evening. Really quickly, one question. I want to know what's being done to hire more police officers to effect Operation Home Safe. When you already have a police department that is undermanned and the resources available to the Anaheim residents from an enforcement aspect, I'm all for all of the advocates that are here and those that are trying to help those in their need. But what I have to remind you as council members, you were elected by the residents of Anaheim, for the residents of Anaheim. And if I look at this statistic, livability in Anaheim, 68%. Cost of living, F. Education, F. Housing, B+. Amenities,
A+. We know where that comes from. Crime, D+. Employment, D. Weather, A. Well, if you want to look at what I'm not hearing tonight is this is not Anaheim's problem. And I don't know where there's a meeting being held in Yorba Linda, Placentia, Fullerton, Tustin, Santa Ana, Orange, all these other cities and neighboring cities. And my issue is, why are we continually talking about as if this is Anaheim's responsibility? When the fact is, if you look at the statistics, Pasadena, Long Beach, Riverside counties, Ventura counties, San Bernardino counties, their homeless populations have decreased. Do you know why? Because they're here. Because if you build it, I've said this from the very beginning, almost a year ago in this church, if you build it, they will come. And they're here, and I don't know what to do with them. Because it wasn't spearheaded enough in the beginning when they first got here to head this off. Until now it's a problem, and for everyone you help, that has a friend, or a boyfriend, or a girlfriend. And I know this because I've done the enforcement, that are walking down my street, my neighbor's street, and it's unfortunate that the police officers are so taxed that in District 5, I'd love to see the average response time that District 5 gets when they call the police department. Because as of the last 3 incidents, it's been 45 minutes or longer. And that, from someone who's done it, is ridiculous. It's unimaginable, and for a city that should be just sitting in money, the Ducks, the Angels, Anaheim Convention Center, Disneyland, that is a failure of this city's government, that we do not have the resources, that we could have got out ahead of this problem before it ever became an epidemic, and before we ever needed Operation Home Safe to begin with.
Yes, Jay Sean.
We've spoken before. I completely appreciate your frustration, and I hear it in your voice. And to the current council's credit, we are staffed at a level never seen in my career. We're authorized 408 officers. Over 400 of those positions are filled, thanks to the generosity of council, 40 officers over 4 years. That's pretty remarkable. And to our personnel department for getting all those positions filled. I won't stand up here and tell you I don't want more. Of course, we want more police officers. That is a long-term, incremental goal of ours. And we're not proud of the response times. That is a simple function of boots on the ground, how many black and whites are out driving around. I completely agree with you there. We are looking every day. In fact, in the last few weeks, we've actually retooled some of our deployment and found positions throughout the department that are better served at the patrol level. So you'll see, regardless of whether our total number of officers goes up or does not go up, they're going to be deployed areas where they're going to have more impact for you. But I appreciate your comments, and I just want to thank the council for their generosity to get us to where we are.
Quick question about the officers and the deployment. When you call in to 765 or just 911 numbers, you have officers answering the phone. Shouldn't they be in the car somewhere instead of answering phones?
Chief, can you restate?
Sure. He says when he calls 765, 1900 or 911, sometimes a police officer answers the phone. If they do, they're working overtime to fill a vacancy in the dispatch ranks, or they're on light duty. So we try to deploy our light duty officers where they're the most impact. A lot of times an officer, if they answer a phone call, it's not a police matter. My 8-year-old won't go to school. We're not going to generate a call for service because it's a police officer answering the phone. So it could be overtime or it could be light duty. Good point. We don't want them up there. They're better served out in the field, but it's because they're either injured or on overtime.
Another question?
So the night that the city council debated and eventually passed the state of emergency, and passed your Operation Home Safe. Right there. So Supervisor Spitzer was there, and they gave a little talk in the beginning and alluded to the fact that the county had $270 million in their budget someplace that was to be set aside for homelessness. And he went on to allude to the fact that he was going to be supportive of Anaheim's decision if we were to pass that emergency act. So the basic question is any of that money been allocated, spent? Has Anaheim seen anything from the county?
Well, I'll try to tag team both to assist with some answers. One, I think it's a misnomer to say that Anaheim's the only one who's dealing with this issue. I mean, Dana Point, you saw it in the paper, very affluent community on the coast, has encampments popping up on their libraries. A woman was accosted using a computer to seek a job in the library, and they're seeing drug use and other issues in their restrooms. So every community is dealing with this issue, every single one. And I serve on regional boards as the city's representative, and all of my colleagues from Ventura to the very far Inland Empire to San Diego say they are dealing with this issue and struggling with this issue. So it's not just an Anaheim issue. And we have included our city and our neighboring city partners in first getting Kramer open and then through this program as well. Trust me, they're dealing with it. Orange had hundreds of people, residents, show up to one of their most recent council meetings saying they've had enough and they want help and they want relief. So it is an issue that is affecting every community. And as I mentioned earlier, we have seen the largest outbreaks, the second largest, I should say, in the nation in the last 20 years in San Diego, LA, and Santa Cruz of hepatitis A because of encampments that have formed there. This is a universal problem, a human issue that is happening and affecting every single community in the state and in many parts of the nation. So we are doing our very best to address it where it's existing in our community. The other is there are state laws that voters went to the polls and passed, Proposition 47 and 57. So this can't just be blamed on government because residents went and voted and they passed, which one reduced the criminal penalties for drug usage, for petty crime. I mean, our officers can only give a misdemeanor ticket if somebody breaks into a car and steals a purse and the contents are less than $900. It's a fix-it ticket. So, you know, the bikes that were stolen that we saw in one of the encampments in Fountain Valley, unless they can be proven to have been a part of a serial theft ring, the individuals can only get a misdemeanor. It's a fine. It's not even jail time for that. Drug use can be done right in front of an officer. If it's done for personal use, there's very little the officers can do to combat that. That's state law that was passed by voters on the ballot. The other was an early parole program. And I have nearly 30% of those who were interviewed by CityNet and the county in their most recent update say they were released through some kind of parole in the last year. So we're dealing as communities, not just with those who are dealing with homelessness because of economic or mental health or other reasons, but because we have some state laws that were approved by residents across the state. So it is a comprehensive issue.
Christine, one of the questions that was just asked was, despite the supervisor's commitment of $270 million to fight homelessness in Orange County that he would put at our disposal, I know that you're working very, very closely with the County of Orange, meet with them regularly, communicate with them daily. What have you seen that would give us an indication that they are being more cooperative now financially than they were in the past, if any?
Well, first of all, they engaged the services of CityNet. That was a $750,000 contract. They've never done that before. The law enforcement, they're the lead on the joint task force, and they're really doing the heavy lifting on that. The signage, the security gates, the locks that they're putting in. So they have spent additional money that they weren't spending in the past. We are working very closely with Frank Kim, the CEO, and our elected officials are working with the Board of Supervisors. And one of the things is this temporary emergency shelter. We fully expect that the county will be the one that will be funding that effort.
Where's it going to be?
I don't have a location.
Well, that's the question. Everybody has a huge chunk of land to build airport. And everybody's always saying, do more, do more, do more. But the only people people that are saying do more, the do more winds up in Anaheim and Orange and Santa Ana. South County says do more, but not over here, no.
And you do have one board of supervisor that is, he was promoting the Irvine Park area. That was the location that.
But that got shut down. So why do we have to bear the brunt of everything? Basically what I'm asking. And a lot of people here are thinking the same thing.
I'll touch on some of the costs of enforcement. Sergeant Bozell can help me out with some of the numbers.
We're back to Irvine.
Right, but I want as far as the county's investment in this, and Mike, you can back me up, but on a recent weekend, the county had 16 deputies out there, a handful of sergeants. So they're deploying a significant number of personnel, and those personnel are working the entire stretch of the riverbed. So I don't want you to think that they're abdicating their responsibility in that area.
Well,
Mike, is that fairly accurate?
East side of the riverbed, they just piled up a mountain of dirt over there and shoved everything on this side. So back to.
So just really quick though, we're not at a place because we don't have approvals yet to talk about specific sites, but we are looking at several sites with the county right now. We will be bringing to council some options to consider on December 5th.
Are any of those in Anaheim?
We're looking at Anaheim and outside of Anaheim and county-owned product parcels. Well, we have to provide.
Yeah, no, I'll disagree with you. How's that? Yeah. And why are y'all allowed to ask so many questions? You didn't raise your hand to ask all these questions. Doesn't seem like that's
I have a question. Right now we have, I guess, 1,000 homeless on the riverbed. So tomorrow magically there was 500 shelters, homes for them. You have 500 that are left. Does this open a 500 vacancy for more homeless from out of the city and county? What control do you guys have on a daily basis of new homeless people coming in and staying here at Angel State? And that goes for the county, the city, the state, because it seems like, it sounds bad, but it seems like a lot of homeless from other, states are flocking in here, which it's a statewide problem. So with that said, I think that we're going to come across a problem where a lot of us residents are going to end up teaming up together to say, well, the homeless have rights, and I get it. We want to help them. We do want to help the homeless that want to be helped. But we're enabling the ones that do not. So if that continues, I don't know if a few of us are just going to get together and say, well, how do we just sue somebody that's enabling, not helping, because we're here to help? How? What do you do for the ones that are enabling? The city's enabling certain, homeless people out there.
You had a few questions in there. I'll try to answer some of it, and then I'm also going to ask Brad, who can talk about, where the individuals come from that he sees out on the street. But you're absolutely right. California and Florida are the two states that have the highest homeless population, and you can probably figure out why. It is the weather.